You think this empire runs because of you? I could replace you by noon tomorrow." The shout echoed off the marble walls of Westhaven Manor, shattering the morning silence. Duke Isaac stared down at the woman who had managed his entire life for 3 years, his eyes cold with arrogance. He expected tears, he expected begging, but Clarice didn't flinch. She simply placed a silver pen on the mahogany desk, smoothed her skirts and whispered, "As you wish, Your Grace." She walked out, leaving nothing behind but a single envelope sealed with red wax. When Isaac finally opened it, the color drained from his face. It wasn't a resignation letter. It was a royal warrant, and he had just fired the only person keeping him out of prison. The year was 1814, and the autumn rain lashed against the grey stones of Blackwood Hall, the ancestral seat of the Duchy of Harrington. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and the sharp scent of arrogance. Duke Isaac Harrington was a man who believed the world bent to his will simply because he existed. At 32, he was one of the wealthiest men in England, possessing a jawline that made debutantes swoon and a temper that made grown men tremble. He managed vast estates, shipping lines in the East Indies, and a seat in the House of Lords, or rather, he believed he managed them. In reality, the Duchy of Harrington was managed by Miss Clarice Whitmore. Clarice was 24. With chestnut hair she kept pinned back so severely it threatened to give her a headache, and eyes the color of steel. For 3 years she had served as Isaac's personal secretary. But secretary was a woefully inadequate title. Clarice was his memory, his conscience, and his shield. When the localized famine struck his tenant farmers in Derbyshire, it was Clarice who routed grain from his southern stores before the riots began, forging his signature on the transport orders because he was too busy gambling at White's. When the French trade deal threatened to collapse due to a mistranslated clause, it was Clarice who stayed up 3 nights in a row, rewriting the contract in flawless French, saving the Duke a loss of £50,000. She was invisible to him, a piece of furniture, a self-correcting quill. "Where is the ledger of imports?" Isaac barked, storming into the library without knocking. He was dressed in riding leathers, mud splattered on his boots. Clarice didn't look up from her desk, which was tucked into a drafty corner of the room. "Top drawer, left side, under the correspondence from Lord Pennyworth." Isaac yanked the drawer open and retrieved the book. He didn't thank her. He never thanked her. "And the invitation for the grand ball tonight. Lady Genevieve is expecting me to escort her." "On the mantelpiece," Clarice said, her voice calm, though her hand tightened slightly on her pen. "I also took the liberty of sending a bouquet of white lilies to her residence this morning in your name, as you forgot her birthday yesterday." Isaac paused, leafing through the ledger. He glanced at her, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He hated that she knew him so well. He hated that she knew his failures better than he did. "I didn't forget," he lied smoothly. "I simply delayed." "Of course, Your Grace." "And Clarice," he added, his tone sharpening, "ensure the library is cleared by 6. Genevieve finds the smell of ink tedious. We shall be having drinks here before the carriage arrives." "I will be gone by 5, Your Grace," he scoffed. "Good. Sometimes I feel you haunt this room. It's unsettling." Clarice finally looked up. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. "I only aim to serve the duchy, Isaac." He stiffened at the use of his first name. She had never used it before. "It is Your Grace," he corrected coldly. "Do not mistake your utility for familiarity, Miss Whitmore. You are an employee, a well-paid one, but an employee nonetheless." Clarice held his gaze for a second too long. "Is that all I am? What else would you be?" Isaac laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You organize papers, you dip pens, You are a clerk in a dress, valuable perhaps in the way a good horse is valuable. But let us not pretend you are indispensable." The air in the room shifted. It grew heavy, charged with the static of a storm about to break. Clarice closed the ledger she was working on. It was the private audit of the Crown, a document Isaac didn't even know existed. "I see," Clarice said softly. "Don't look so tragic." Isaac waved a hand dismissively. "Now get me the brandy, the vintage from 1795. I need a drink before I deal with the tenant disputes." Clarice stood up. She walked to the crystal cabinet, poured the amber liquid into a glass, and set it down on his desk. But she didn't return to her corner. She stood there, watching him. "Is there something else?" Isaac snapped, not looking up from his papers. "The tenants in the north aren't disputing the rent, Your Grace," she said quietly. "They are disputing the poisoning of the river by your new copper mine, the one you approved without reading the environmental survey I prepared." Isaac slammed the ledger shut. "I am the Duke of Harrington. I do not need a lecture on land management from a secretary. They are dying, Isaac. 3 children died last week. Enough." He stood up, towering over her. "I approved that mine because it yields 10,000 a month. If the peasants are unhappy, they can move. And if you are unhappy with my decisions, you can keep your mouth shut. I pay you to write, not to think." "I think to save you from hanging," she whispered. He didn't hear the last part. Or if he did, he didn't understand it. He only saw a subordinate challenging his authority. The stress of the debt he was hiding, debt from his father's era that he was desperately trying to clear with the copper mine, made him lash out. "You are becoming a nuisance, Clarice," he sneered. "Lady Genevieve thinks you are in love with me. Is that it? Is that why you nag me like a fishwife?" Clarice's face went white. "I am trying to protect the legacy of this house." "I am the legacy," Isaac roared. The shout rang through the hall, startling the footman outside the door. Isaac walked around the desk, invading her personal space, using his height to intimidate. "Let us be very clear, Miss Whitmore. You are here because I allow it. You exist in this society because I grant you a wage. You have no family, no title, no land. You are nothing without the Harrington patronage." Clarice remained perfectly still. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her exterior was granite. She thought of the letter in her pocket, the letter from the King's Privy Council. She had been holding it off for weeks, negotiating, pleading, using every ounce of influence she had to buy him time to fix the mine disaster. "I am not nothing," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You are a replaceable part," Isaac yelled, his face flushing red. "I could snap my fingers and have 10 women in here by noon tomorrow who can write a letter and pour a drink. You think you are special? You are a glorious inconvenience." He grabbed a crystal paperweight from the desk, a gift she had given him for Christmas 2 years ago, and slammed it down. It didn't break, but the sound was like a gunshot. "Get out," he hissed. "Get out of my sight. If you cannot respect your betters, then you do not belong in Blackwood Hall." Clarice looked at the paperweight. Then she looked at him. The love she had harbored for him, a foolish, quiet thing that had survived 3 years of neglect, finally sputtered and died. It was replaced by something colder, something sharper. Clarification. "Are you dismissing me, Your Grace?" she asked formally. "I am telling you to learn your place." "I asked if you are dismissing me." Her voice was like a blade of ice. Isaac threw his hands up. "Fine, yes. Leave. Take the week off. Take the month off. Maybe hunger will teach you some humility." "I will not be taking a month off," Clarice said. She reached into the pocket of her modest grey dress. If I leave this room, Isaac, I do not come back. And if I do not come back, there is no one to hold the wolves back. I am a wolf, he laughed. I don't need protection from sheep like you. Clarice nodded slowly. She pulled out a thick cream envelope. It was heavy, sealed not with the Harrington crest, but with a different seal, one of deep crimson wax. She placed it gently on the center of his desk, right on top of the invitation to Lady Genevieve's ball. Then I resign, she said. Effective immediately. Isaac rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic. You'll be back before supper. Clarice didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors. She moved with a grace he had never noticed before, a regal straightness in her spine that seemed at odds with her station. Clarice, he called out as she reached the handle. If you walk out that door, don't expect a reference. You'll starve in the streets of London. She paused, her hand on the brass latch. She didn't look back. I suspect, Your Grace, that you will be the one in need of a reference. The door clicked shut. Isaac stood alone in the silence of the library. He felt a strange vibration in his chest, a mix of triumph and unease. He poured himself another drink, his hands shaking slightly. Good riddance, he muttered. Sour woman. He sat down, intending to finish his work, but his eyes kept drifting to the envelope she had left. It looked out of place among his chaotic papers. It looked official, dangerous. He scoffed and reached for it. Probably a bill for her pencils, he muttered. He broke the wax seal. He unfolded the parchment. His eyes scanned the header. To the High Auditor of the Crown, he frowned. Why would Clarice have a letter addressed to the High Auditor? He read the first line. Subject: Investigation into the Harrington estate and the treasonous mismanagement of royal resources. His breath hitched. He read further. By order of His Majesty, King George III, the bearer of this seal, Lady Clarice of House Stirling, Duchess of Avondale, is acting as the royal proxy to assess the fitness of the Duke of Harrington to hold his title. Isaac froze. The glass of brandy slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and shattered, sending amber liquid and shards of crystal skittering across the rug. Duchess? He looked at the signature at the bottom. It was signed in Clarice's familiar, elegant script, but below it was a stamp he recognized from his days in Parliament. The royal seal of the inner circle. Clarice wasn't a nobody. House Stirling was an extinct line, or so everyone thought. The Stirlings were the king's personal fixers. They were richer than God and twice as dangerous. And the final paragraph, the ink was still fresh, written perhaps minutes ago. Final assessment. The Duke of Harrington is arrogant, negligent, and financially incompetent. I can no longer protect him from the Crown's seizure of his assets. I hereby withdraw my seal of protection. The audit is approved. Seizure of Blackwood Hall is authorized to begin at dawn. Isaac stared at the paper. The silence of the house suddenly felt very loud. He stood up, knocking his chair over. Clarice! He screamed, sprinting for the door. Clarice! But as he tore open the library doors and ran into the grand foyer, the front gates of Blackwood Hall were already closing. Through the rain, he saw a black carriage pulling away. It wasn't a hired hackney. It was a sleek, black carriage with the royal crest on the door. She was gone, and she had taken his life with her. The dawn didn't bring sunlight. It brought a cavalcade of black carriages that lined the gravel driveway of Blackwood Hall like a funeral procession. Isaac hadn't slept. He was still in the library, the shattered glass of brandy crusted on the rug, the damning letter clutched in his hand. He had spent the night tearing through Clarice's desk, looking for a sign that this was a joke, a forgery, a madness. He found nothing but meticulously organized receipts and a half-finished embroidery hoop tucked in a bottom drawer. A humble, domestic object that looked absurdly out of place next to the Royal Warrant on his desk. A heavy pounding on the front doors shook the house. Isaac straightened his cravat, though his shirt was wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot. "Higgins!" he shouted for his butler. "Higgins, send them away! Tell them the Duke is indisposed!" But Higgins didn't answer. Instead, the library doors were pushed open. Not by his elderly butler, but by a man Isaac had never seen before. He was tall, gaunt, and wore the severe black coat of a king's magistrate. Behind him stood 4 soldiers in the red coats of the Royal Guard. "Who the devil are you?" Isaac demanded, trying to summon the imperious tone that usually sent men scurrying. "You are trespassing on the Harrington estate." The gaunt man adjusted his spectacles. "I am Sir Thomas Roth, Chief Auditor for the Crown, and as of 6:00 a.m. this morning, this is no longer the Harrington estate. It is a seized asset under investigation for high treason and gross financial negligence." "Treason?" Isaac laughed, a high, desperate sound. "I am a peer of the realm. You are a bankrupt spendthrift who has been protected by a guardian angel," Roth said, walking into the room and running a gloved finger over the dusty mantelpiece. "And since you saw fit to dismiss that angel, the protection is gone." Roth snapped his fingers. The soldiers began moving through the room, picking up vases, paintings, and silverware, tagging them with white slips of paper. "Stop that!" Isaac lunged forward, grabbing a soldier's arm. "That is a Ming vase! Put it down!" The soldier shoved him back with easy force. Isaac stumbled against the desk. "Sit down, Mr. Harrington," Roth said coldly. He didn't use the title. The omission was a slap in the face. "We have much to discuss." Roth pulled a ledger from his briefcase. It wasn't one of the books Clarice kept in the library. It was a black book, bound in iron. "Do you know what this is?" Roth asked. "I have never seen it," Isaac spat. "Of course you haven't. This is the debt of the father. Your father, the late Duke, gambled away the family fortune 10 years ago. Technically, you inherited nothing but debt. The estate should have been auctioned off the day he died." Isaac felt the room spin. "That's a lie. We are wealthy. I have the shipping lines, the copper mine." "The shipping lines were seized by the East India Company 5 years ago for unpaid tariffs," Roth recited, bored. "The income you have been receiving? That was paid out of the private coffers of the Duchess of Avondale. Lady Clarice." Isaac went cold. "Clarice paid my bills?" "She paid everything," Roth said, slamming the book shut. "She purchased your debt. She paid the servants. She bribed the trade union leaders to keep your copper mine open, despite the fact that it is pumping arsenic into the village water supply. She has spent 3 years and approximately £400,000 of her own inheritance, keeping up the illusion that you are a functioning member of society." Isaac sank into his chair. The magnitude of it was suffocating. He thought of Clarice, sitting in that draughty corner, wearing the same 3 grey dresses, eating cold toast while he feasted on pheasant. He had told her she was lucky to have a job. He had told her she would starve without him. "Why?" Isaac whispered. "Why would she do that?" Roth looked at him with genuine pity, which was worse than the contempt. "Because, you fool, she was betrothed to you." The silence that followed was absolute. "What?" "An arrangement made by your fathers when you were infants. The Sterling family fell out of favor, and they went into hiding. You thought they were extinct. When Clarice came of age, she came to honor the contract. She wanted to see if you were a man worthy of her hand and her fortune. So she posed as a secretary to observe you." Roth gestured around the room. Evidently she didn't like what she saw. She was testing me?" She was giving you a chance, Roth corrected. She cleared your path. She fixed your mistakes. She waited for you to show 1 ounce of gratitude, 1 ounce of humility, or perhaps, God forbid, some affection. Instead, you treated her like a piece of furniture and endangered her reputation by nearly getting arrested for the mine disaster. Roth stood up. The audit will take 3 days. You are permitted to stay in the guest quarters. The master suite is sealed. I suggest you find a good solicitor, Mr. Harrington. Though without, Lady, Clarice's money to pay him, I doubt you'll find one who can keep you out of Newgate Prison. Roth turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and the bouquet of lilies you ordered for Lady Genevieve. The florist returned them. Apparently, your credit at the shop was also guaranteed by Clarice. It has been revoked. By noon, Blackwood Hall was a skeleton. The rugs were rolled up, the silver was crated, and the servants, who Isaac realized had been loyal to Clarice, not him, had vanished. Isaac sat on a wooden crate in the center of the library. The fire had gone out, and the room was freezing. He had spent the last 4 hours trying to find a loophole, some asset she hadn't touched. He found nothing. Desperation clawed at his throat. He needed to find her. He needed to explain. No, he needed to beg. He remembered the carriage, the royal seal. She was the Duchess of Avondale. That meant she would be at the Sterling estate in London, a place spoken of in whispers, a fortress of old money and older power. But first, he needed to understand. He crawled over to where Clarice's desk sat, now stripped bare. He pulled the drawers out, dumping them on the floor. Dust, paper clips, a dried-up inkwell. Then his hand brushed against something taped to the underside of the bottom drawer. He ripped it loose. It was a small, leather-bound journal. Not a ledger. A diary. He opened it, his hands shaking. October 14th, 1812. He looked at me today. Really looked at me. He asked if I was cold. I lied and said no, because the heating bill is already too high and he needs a new saddle. He has such kind eyes when he isn't trying to be a duke. I think if I can just clear the debt with the French merchants, he might smile again. I remember him smiling when we were children, before his father ruined him. I want to give him that smile back. Isaac felt a lump form in his throat. He turned the page. January 3rd, 1813. He screamed at me again. He called me incompetent because the tea was cold. He doesn't know I sold the silver tea service to pay off the blackmailer who found out about his gambling debts in Bath. I replaced it with plated tin. He didn't notice. Does he notice anything? I am tired, but I promised his mother I would look after him. His mother. Clarice had known his mother? He flipped to the end. The entry was dated yesterday. The ink was blotchy, as if stained by tears. January 16th, 1814. It is over. He is going to poison the river. I tried to show him the survey. I tried to tell him about the children in the village. He wouldn't listen. He only cares about the money. I cannot protect a man who destroys others to save himself. My heart is broken, not because I lost him, but because I finally see that the man I loved never existed. He is just a hollow shell. I must use the seal. I must stop the mine, even if it destroys him. Goodbye, my love. Isaac closed the book. He pressed it against his forehead, a sob racking his chest. She hadn't just been managing his money. She had been managing his soul. She had been the only thing standing between him and moral bankruptcy. You idiot, he whispered to the empty room. You absolute, arrogant idiot. He stood up. The despair was gone, replaced by a frantic energy. He had to fix this. Not the money. He didn't care about the money anymore. He had to stop the mine. He had to prove to her that he wasn't the monster she wrote about in the final entry. He ran out of the library, ignoring the startled shout of a guard. He burst out into the rain, not toward the stables. His horses were seized, but toward the village. It was a 5-mile walk in the pouring rain. Isaac ruined his boots, his velvet coat was soaked through, and he slipped in the mud twice, but he kept running. He reached the village of Oakhaven by mid-afternoon. It was a miserable cluster of cottages in the shadow of the looming copper mine. The river that ran through it was a sickly, unnatural grey. He ran to the mine foreman's office. The foreman, a burly man named O'Malley, looked up in surprise as the Duke burst in, dripping wet and covered in mud. "Your Grace?" O'Malley stood up. "We didn't expect you. Production is up 10%, just like you asked." "Shut it down," Isaac gasped, bracing himself against the doorframe. O'Malley blinked. "Sir?" "Shut it down," Isaac screamed. "The pumps, the sluice gates, close it all, now." "But Your Grace, the profits." "I don't care about the profits. It's poisoning the water. Shut it down, or I will tear it down with my bare hands." O'Malley stared at him for a second, then nodded slowly. He reached for the alarm bell. As the klaxon rang out over the valley, signaling the halt of machinery, Isaac collapsed onto a bench outside the office. He watched the smoke stop pouring from the chimneys. He had done one right thing. One. "A little late for a change of heart, isn't it?" The voice came from a carriage that had pulled up silently through the mud. It wasn't the black royal carriage. It was a simple, unmarked coach. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was dressed in impeccable grey silk. He had silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from flint. Isaac recognized him. It was Lord Silas Stirling, Clarice's uncle, the head of the Stirling family. "Lord Silas!" Isaac tried to stand, but his legs were shaking. "Sit, boy," Silas said, leaning on a cane with a ruby handle. "My niece told me you were a lost cause. She said you were beyond redemption." Silas looked at the silent mine, then back at the mud-caked Duke. "She is rarely wrong," Silas mused. "But perhaps she was hasty." "Where is she?" Isaac pleaded. "Please, I need to tell her. I need to tell her she was right." Silas smiled, a cold, thin smile. "She is at the royal court, Isaac. She is petitioning the king to annul the betrothal contract officially. She is going to marry Prince Frederick of Prussia, a man who knows the value of a duchess." Isaac felt the blood drain from his face. "Prince Frederick, the most eligible bachelor in Europe." "No," Isaac whispered. "Yes," Silas said. "If you want to stop her, you have a long way to go. You have no money, no carriage, and you look like a beggar." Silas opened the carriage door. "However," the old man said, "I have always enjoyed a good wager, and I bet Clarice £10 that you would try to save the mine first. She bet you would try to save your bank account." Silas tossed a small bag of coins at Isaac's feet. "Get cleaned up, Harrington. The royal ball is tonight. If you can get past the guards, past the king, and past the prince, you might get a chance to say goodbye." Silas climbed back into the carriage. "Don't disappoint me. I hate losing money." The carriage rolled away, leaving Isaac standing in the mud with a bag of gold and a sliver of hope. London was a beast of smoke and cobblestones, indifferent to the fall of great men. Isaac arrived as the gas lamps were flickering to life along the Mall. The bag of coins Silas had thrown him significantly lighter. He had secured passage on a mail coach, a humiliation in itself, squeezed between a fishmonger and a crate of chickens, and had rented a room in a boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage. He stood before a tarnished mirror, adjusting the collar of a rented suit. It was black, simple, and slightly too tight in the shoulders. It was the attire of a merchant or a clerk, not a duke. but it was clean. He shaved with a dull razor, his hand steady for the first time in days. The royal ball was being held at St. James's Palace. The streets leading to the gates were choked with carriages, each one bearing a crest more elaborate than the last. Isaac walked. He walked through the mud, dodging the wheels of the very people he used to dine with. At the main gate, the royal guard stood like statues. A majordomo with a list as long as his arm was checking invitations. "Name?" the man asked, not looking up. "Isaac Harrington," he said. The majordomo paused. He looked up, his nose wrinkling as if he smelled something foul. "Harrington, I have instructions regarding you. You are not on the list. In fact, you are on the excluded list. Current assets under seizure. Persona non grata." "I must speak with the Duchess of Avondale," Isaac said, his voice calm. A week ago, he would have struck this man. Now he simply stood his ground. "The Duchess is the guest of honor," the majordomo scoffed. "She is with the king. Do you really think she wishes to speak with a bankrupt pauper? Move along before I call the constables." Isaac stepped back. He watched the carriages roll in. He saw Lady Genevieve descend from a white carriage, draped in pearls, pearls he had likely paid for. She laughed at something her new escort, a rotund earl, whispered to her. He couldn't get in through the front, but he knew St. James's. He knew it because Clarice had made him memorize the architectural layout 2 years ago when he was lobbying for a seat on the Privy Council. "The servants' entrance in the east wing has a faulty latch on the delivery chute," she had told him, warning him of security risks. He had ignored the warning then. He prayed she hadn't fixed it. He circled the palace, slipping into the shadows of the gardens. He found the east wing. He found the chute. It was tight, smelling of refuse and old vegetables, but the latch gave way with a rusty groan. He tumbled into a scullery, startling a kitchen maid who dropped a tray of tarts. "Shh!" Isaac put a finger to his lips. He reached into his pocket and handed her his last gold sovereign. "I was never here." The maid stared at the coin, then at his handsome, desperate face. She nodded mutely. Isaac navigated the back corridors. He moved through the kitchens, the steam rising around him like fog, dodging waiters carrying silver platters of pheasant and lark. He emerged into the hallway behind the grand ballroom. The music hit him first, a waltz, swelling and crashing like the ocean. Then the light, 1,000 candles in crystal chandeliers. He stepped out from behind a velvet curtain and into the crowd. The room was a sea of silk and jewels. He felt invisible, a grey ghost in a technicolor world. He scanned the room, his heart pounding, and then he saw her. She was standing on a dais near the throne, speaking with King George himself. But this was not the Clarice he knew. The grey wool dress was gone, replaced by a gown of deep midnight blue velvet that shimmered like the night sky. Diamonds, real, heavy, ancient diamonds, glittered at her throat and in her hair. She held herself with a terrifying grace, her chin high, her laugh light and polite. She looked powerful. She looked untouchable. Standing next to her was Prince Frederick of Prussia. The prince was tall, blonde, and looked at Clarice as if she were the only woman in the world. He said something, and Clarice smiled. A real smile, one Isaac hadn't seen in years. Jealousy, hot and acidic, burned in Isaac's gut. But beneath it was shame. He had hidden that radiance. He had dressed it in grey and buried it in a library. He began to push through the crowd. "Watch it, fellow," a voice snapped. Isaac turned. It was Lord Pennyworth, a man he had played cards with every Tuesday for a decade. "Pennyworth," Isaac nodded. Pennyworth squinted, then his eyes went wide. "Harrington, good God, man, you look like a chimney sweep. Is it true? Did they really take the estate?" The whisper spread like wildfire. "Harrington is here. Look at his suit. Look at his shoes." The crowd parted, not out of respect, but out of revulsion. They drew back as if poverty were a contagious disease. Lady Genevieve turned, saw him, and audibly gasped. She snapped her fan open, covering her face, and turned her back on him. "Security!" someone hissed. Isaac kept walking. His eyes were locked on the dais. Clarice froze. She sensed the shift in the room. She looked down from the platform, past the prince, past the king, and her eyes met Isaac's. For a moment, the mask slipped. Shock, pain, and something else, fear, flashed across her face. Prince Frederick followed her gaze. He frowned, his hand going to the hilt of his ceremonial sword. Isaac stopped at the foot of the dais. The music died down as the orchestra realized something was wrong. The silence was heavy, suffocating. "Your Grace," Isaac said, his voice ringing out in the quiet hall. He bowed low, a perfect, courtly bow that mocked his shabby clothes. "Mr. Harrington," Clarice said. Her voice was cool, amplified by the acoustics of the room. "You are not on the guest list." "I seem to have misplaced my invitation," Isaac said, straightening up. "Along with my fortune, my home, and my dignity." A titter of nervous laughter ran through the crowd. "What do you want, Isaac?" Clarice asked, stepping forward to the edge of the dais. "If you are here to ask for money, you are wasting your time. The audit is final." "I don't want money," Isaac said. "Then what? The deed to the house? The shipping lines?" "I want to tell you that I went to Oakhaven," he said softly. The color drained from Clarice's face. The cool facade cracked. "You went to the mine?" "I shut it down," Isaac said. "I turned off the pumps. I fired the foreman. The river will run clear by tomorrow." The crowd murmured. They didn't understand. But Clarice did. "You closed the mine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But that was your only source of income. Without it, you are truly destitute." "I know," Isaac said. "I would rather be poor than be the man who disappointed you." Prince Frederick stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Clarice's arm. "Who is this man, Clarice? Shall I have the guards remove him?" Clarice looked at the prince, then back at Isaac. The air crackled with tension. "No," Clarice said, her voice regaining its strength. She gently removed the prince's hand from her arm. "No guards." She descended the stairs of the dais, the heavy velvet of her gown swishing softly. The crowd parted further, creating a wide circle around them. It was a gladiator arena of gossip. She stopped 2 feet from him. Up close, he could see the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. She wasn't just angry. She was exhausted. "You shut the mine," she repeated, searching his face for a lie. "Why? To impress me? To get your bank account unlocked?" "Because I read the journal," Isaac confessed. Clarice stiffened. "You had no right." "I had no right to any of it," he agreed. "I had no right to your time, your mind, or your protection. I treated you like a fixture in my house while you were holding the roof up." He took a step closer, ignoring the gasp from Lady Genevieve. "I am not here to stop you from marrying the prince," Isaac said, glancing briefly at the Prussian royal who was watching with narrowed eyes. "He is rich. He is powerful. He probably remembers your birthday." "He is a better match." "He is," Clarice said coldly. "He respects me." "I know." Isaac swallowed the lump in his throat. "I just came to return this." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon or a letter. He pulled out a small, tarnished silver pen. It was the pen she had used every day for 3 years, the one she had left on his desk. He held it out. His hand was shaking. "You forgot your pen," he said. "And I I cannot write the future without it. But you can. Clarice looked at the pen. Her eyes welled up with sudden, unbidden tears. It was such a small thing, a stupid, trivial thing, but it was an acknowledgment of her work, of her identity. "You are a fool, Isaac," she whispered. "I am," he said, "but I am a fool who is learning. I will face the debt. I will face the prison if need be. But I couldn't face you leaving without telling you that I saw you. Finally, I saw you. Is this a performance?" A sharp voice cut through the moment. It was King George. The monarch remained on his throne, but his voice carried the weight of the empire. "We are not amused by theatrics, Mr. Harrington. You have committed treason against the crown by mishandling resources." Isaac turned to face the king. He bowed. "It is no performance, Your Majesty. It is a confession." "A confession?" The king raised an eyebrow. "I confess that I was blind," Isaac said, "and I confess that the Duchess of Avondale is the only reason the Harrington lands are not a wasteland. If there is a debt to be paid to the crown, take me. But do not let my failures tarnish her name." The king looked at Clarice. "Well, Duchess, he offers himself for the chopping block. Shall we accept?" The room held its breath. This was it, the twist of the knife. She could end him with a word. She could send him to Newgate and sail to Prussia with a prince. Clarice looked at Isaac. She saw the mud on his shoes. She saw the desperation in his eyes. Not for money, but for redemption. She reached out and took the silver pen from his hand. Their fingers brushed, a spark of electricity that made them both flinch. "No, Your Majesty." Clarice turned to the king. "We shall not accept." Prince Frederick stiffened. "Clarice?" "The mine is closed," Clarice declared, her voice strong. "The source of the corruption is gone. Mr. Harrington has taken the first step toward remediation." "Remediation?" The king chuckled. "He is bankrupt, my dear. He cannot remediate a broken window, let alone a duchy." "He has one asset left," Clarice said. Isaac frowned. "I do?" Clarice turned back to him, her eyes flashing with a challenge. "Me." The crowd gasped. "I have not annulled the contract yet," Clarice said, her voice dropping so only Isaac could hear. "The papers are in my carriage, unsigned." "Clarice," Isaac breathed. "You don't have to." "Quiet," she snapped, sounding very much like his secretary again. "Do not mistake this for forgiveness, Isaac. This is a merger." She turned to the crowd, addressing them all. "The Harrington estate is under new management, joint management, and the first order of business is a full audit of every guest in this room who accepted Harrington hospitality while mocking his name." She glared at Lady Genevieve, who suddenly found her fan very interesting. Clarice turned back to Isaac. "You have a lot of work to do. You will not be the Duke. You will be my secretary. You will learn every ledger, every tenant name, every trade route. You will work until your hands are stained with ink and your back aches. And if you fail me one more time, I will sign those papers and marry Frederick before the ink is dry." She held out her hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Isaac looked at her hand. It was an offer of servitude. It was an offer of life. He took her hand and kissed the knuckles, ignoring the glare of the Prussian prince. "As you wish, Your Grace," he whispered. "Good," Clarice said. She turned to the prince. "Frederick, I am afraid I cannot dance the next waltz. I have business to attend to." She gripped Isaac's arm, her nails digging into his coat. "Come, we are leaving." "Leaving?" Isaac stumbled as she pulled him toward the exit. "Where are we going?" "To the bank," she said, marching him past the stunned courtiers. "And then to Blackwood. If you think you are sleeping in a guest room, You are mistaken. You are sleeping in the stables until you earn your way back into the house." As they exited the ballroom, leaving the whispers and the scandal behind them, Isaac felt a strange sensation in his chest. He was ruined. He was demoted. He was terrified. But for the first time in his life, he was free. However, as the carriage doors closed and the horses pulled away into the rainy London night, Clarice's face fell. The strength vanished, replaced by a deep, trembling anxiety. "You should know," she whispered into the dark of the carriage, "that I lied to the king." Isaac looked at her. "Lied? About what?" "The contract," she said, clutching the silver pen. "I didn't just leave it unsigned. I lost it." Isaac stared at her. "You lost it?" "It was stolen," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "Someone stole the betrothal papers from my heavy box this morning, and if they find out about the clause in Section 9, we are both dead." Isaac felt the blood run cold. "What is in Section 9, Clarice?" She looked at him, terrified. "The clause that states the Harrington land sits on the largest deposit of gunpowder sulfur in England. The clause that says, if we marry, we control the army's supply. And if we don't marry, then the rights revert to the Crown's biggest rival," she whispered, "to the French." Isaac looked out the window. The shadows of London seemed to have grown teeth. The romance was over. The war had just begun. The carriage careened around a corner, the wheels skidding on the wet cobblestones of Fleet Street. Inside, the air was thick with panic. "Think, Clarice," Isaac urged, gripping her hands to stop them from trembling. "Who had access? The box was in your room at the Sterling estate." "No," Clarice shook her head, her eyes wide. "I brought the box to Blackwood Hall the day before I resigned. I intended to give it to you, to explain the legacy, before you started yelling. I left it in the safe." Isaac's blood ran cold. "The safe? The one Roth seized first?" "Sir Thomas Roth," Clarice whispered, the realization dawning on her with horrifying clarity. "He didn't just come to audit the books. He came for the Section 9 clause. He knew about the sulfur." "He's selling it," Isaac growled. "He's selling the rights to the French. If Napoleon gets hold of English sulfur deposits, the war starts all over again." "He'll be heading for the coast," Clarice said. "Or a ship." "The East India docks," Isaac realized. Roth mentioned the trade tariffs earlier. He has a clearance for a midnight departure on a cargo vessel. I saw the permit sticking out of his pocket when he invaded my library. Isaac kicked the roof of the carriage. "Driver, the docks, and don't spare the horses." The East India docks were a labyrinth of shadows, rotting wood, and the smell of tar. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, masking the sound of their arrival. They spotted Roth's carriage near Pier 4. A lantern flickered in the fog, revealing the gaunt auditor, standing next to a short, stocky man in a heavy coat. Captain Renard, a known smuggler. Roth was holding the document. The parchment was getting wet. 2 million francs, Roth was saying, his voice carrying over the wind. "Payable to my account in Geneva." "It is done," the Frenchman replied, reaching for the paper. "Stop." Isaac leaped from the moving carriage before it even halted. He landed in the mud, slipped, scrambled up, and charged. He was no soldier. He was a nobleman who had spent his life holding wine glasses. Not weapons. But rage is a powerful fuel. Roth turned, his eyes widening behind his spectacles. "Harrington! How?" Isaac didn't talk. He tackled Roth into a stack of crates. The two men went down in a tangle of limbs and wet wool. The document flew from Roth's hand, skittering across the slick wood of the pier, dangerously close to the dark water below. "Get the paper!" Isaac shouted to Clarice. Clarice hitched up her velvet gown and ran. The French captain drew a pistol. He aimed at Isaac, who was currently punching Roth in the jaw. "No!" Clarice screamed. She threw herself not at the paper, but at the captain, slamming her shoulder into his arm. The gun went off with a deafening crack. The bullet missed Isaac by inches, splintering the crate beside his head. Isaac looked up. He saw Clarice grappling with a man twice her size. The useless secretary was fighting a smuggler to save his life. Something primal broke inside Isaac. He grabbed a heavy piece of driftwood from the pier. With a roar that sounded nothing like a duke and everything like a beast, he struck Roth across the temple, knocking him unconscious. He spun around. The Frenchman had thrown Clarice to the ground and was raising the pistol again. "Hey!" Isaac yelled. The Frenchman turned. Isaac swung the driftwood with all his might. It connected with the captain's wrist, shattering the bone. The gun clattered to the deck. The captain howled and stumbled back, losing his footing on the slippery edge. He splashed into the dark, freezing waters of the Thames. Silence fell over the pier, save for the heavy breathing of the two survivors and the relentless rain. Isaac dropped the wood. He fell to his knees beside Clarice. "Are you hurt? Did he hit you?" Clarice was, gasping for air, her beautiful blue dress ruined, her hair a wet disaster. She pushed herself up, her hands scraping against the rough wood. The contract." They both looked. The parchment was stuck to a cleat at the very edge of the pier, flapping in the wind. One strong gust, and the Harrington legacy and England's safety would be gone forever. They crawled toward it together. Isaac reached it first. He snatched it up, pressing it against his chest to shield it from the rain. He looked at it. It was damp, but legible. The betrothal contract. The clause that bound the sulphur mines to the marriage of a Harrington and a Sterling. He looked at Clarice. She was shivering violently, kneeling in the mud. "We have to burn it," Isaac said. "If it doesn't exist, the French can't use it. Roth can't sell it." "No," Clarice said, her teeth chattering. "If we burn it, the Crown seizes the land. Anyway, you lose everything. I lose everything." "I don't care!" Isaac cried. "I almost lost you. I saw that gun pointed at you, and I stopped caring about the title. I stopped caring about the legacy. I just wanted you to breathe." Clarice stared at him. The rain washed away the mud on his face, revealing the man beneath. He wasn't the arrogant boy anymore. He was the man who had charged a gunman for her. "Isaac," she said softly, "give me the pen." "What?" "The silver pen. You still have it in your pocket." He reached into his soaked coat and pulled out the tarnished silver pen. Clarice took the contract from him. She smoothed it out on the wet wood of the pier. "We don't burn it. We execute it." "Here?" Isaac asked. "Now? In the mud?" "Unless you have a better idea, Your Grace." She smiled weakly. "I believe the clause states the contract is binding upon signature of both parties. It doesn't say we need a priest. It doesn't say we need a church." She signed her name. The ink bled slightly into the damp paper, but the signature was bold. Clarice Sterling. She handed the pen to him. Isaac looked at the paper. Signing this meant he was no longer the sole master of his fate. He was entering a partnership. He was admitting he needed her. He didn't hesitate. He signed his name. Isaac Harrington. As he finished the loop of the N, he felt a strange weight lift off his shoulders. The crushing burden of his father's debts, the loneliness of the empty hall, the pretense of perfection. It was all gone. He capped the pen. "So," he said, looking at his new wife. "Does this mean I get my house back?" Clarice laughed, a sound that was half sob. "It means we get our house back, and it means you have a lot of sulphur to mine, Mr. Harrington. But we are doing it safely this time. No poisoning the river." "Agreed," he said. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her fiercely in the pouring rain, amidst the smell of gunpowder and salt water. It wasn't a courtly kiss. It was desperate, messy, and real. 1 year later, the spring sun shone down on the terrace of Blackwood Hall. The windows were open, letting in the scent of blooming flowers and the clear, fresh air from the valley below. The river ran clear. The copper mine had been converted into a state-of-the-art sulfur extraction facility, managed by a union of well-paid workers. The profits were astronomical, fueled by the government contracts that Clarice had negotiated with the Duke of Wellington. Isaac sat at the large mahogany desk in the library. He was covered in ink. "Clarice," he called out, "where is the manifest for the Prussian shipment?" Clarice walked in. She was carrying a baby, a small boy with Isaac's dark eyes and Clarice's determined chin. "Top drawer, right side," she said, bouncing the heir to the Harrington fortune on her hip. "Under the letter from the king, apologizing for the misunderstanding." Isaac found it immediately. He smiled. He stood up, walked over to her, and kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "You know," Isaac said, "I was thinking about hiring a secretary. The paperwork is getting out of hand." Clarice raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and who did you have in mind?" "No one." Isaac grinned, taking the baby from her so she could rest her arms. "I've realized that no one can replace you. I'd rather do the work myself than have anyone else in this room." Clarice smiled, leaning against the desk where she used to sit in the shadows. She touched the silver pen that now sat in a velvet case on the mantelpiece, framed like a weapon of war. "Good answer, Your Grace," she whispered. "Good answer." The Duke of Harrington laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the halls of a house that was finally, truly, a home. And that is the story of how an arrogant duke learned that the most powerful person in the room isn't always the one sitting on the throne. It's the one holding the pen. Isaac thought he could replace Clarice, but he ended up realizing that, without her, he was nothing but a title on a piece of paper. What did you think of the twist with the sulfur mine? And did you expect the copper mine to be the secret to their fortune all along? If you enjoyed this story of redemption, romance, and karma, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a little drama in their life, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes the crown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.